Chapter 1. The Lie in My Enemy's Eye. Harnan Passage, Harnan. Dracobon. Gelton 13.755.BV. July 4th, 1986. In Myrtle, West Virginia. Jack Zulu raced along the tree line, half ducking at each echoing burst from the heavy blaster mounted on the canyon rim above. The ground shuddered as a thick trunk over his shoulder blew apart. "They're getting closer!" Jack ducked as the wood splinters rained down. Wheeler raised a hand in acknowledgement. "Keep moving!" Moving wasn't the problem. Jack was moving fine. It was keeping to the older man's much slower pace that was bothering Jack. They were sitting ducks. Fortunately, the rebels were struggling to get their heavy weapons sighted. Another blast sounded, and the shot sizzled over their heads and impacted deeper in the forest. Jack wanted to run into that forest with its odd squat trees and lie down, hiding from the gunfire. "It is only just ahead," Wheeler grunted as he wiped sweat from his eyes. His glasses had been lost when they were ambushed a few miles back. The peace escort they were promised had turned out to be less than reliable, and so Jack and Wheeler had been divided from Titrus, Timon, and the rest of the Thandalian Rangers who had come with them from the Wayland. Jack fingered the hilt of the blade at his side, nervously eyeing the ridge on the right and wishing he had some weapon that could reach them. He was glad his sword was more than merely ceremonial, despite the fact that this trip was supposed to be for a simple ceremony. The rebels on Dracobon, allied with Rancast's Vandal uprising, appeared to be keener to fight than to sign a surrender agreement. Drox were distinguishable to Jack by a few small features, but none as striking as their fully black eyes, with no white or any other color touching them. Jack's brown eyes thinned to slits, and he pointed to the ridge above. "They're mounting 2 more guns." Wheeler plunged ahead. "They may mount 1,000 if they wish, the devils, but we shall fear none." "I'd like to agree." Jack flinched as another volley struck the tree ahead of Wheeler, blowing apart half the trunk. A second volley cut the tree down entirely, so it fell with a crash to block the way ahead. Jack swiveled to see more gun teams settle in position in little stronghold nests dotting the ridge. "Permission to flee in terror into the forest, sir?" "Denied," Wheeler replied calmly. He reached for his own sword, Caladbolg, and drew it in a swift motion. Blade blurring at its prism-colored edge, Wheeler hacked downward, and the huge tree divided before them. It was a beautiful sword. Wheeler leaped between the halves, Jack behind him, just before a series of concussive blasts made craters of the place they had just been. With a spray of rock and wood behind them, they dashed along the road for 10 more feet before Wheeler called out, "Here!" Relieved, Jack turned to race into the forest, but Wheeler cut right, toward the ridge and the enemies there, all armed to the teeth. Surprise, wide eyes, a sharp intake of air. And Jack was on his mentor's heels, making for the break in the ridge Wheeler had been looking for. A trail appeared ahead, and they reached its relative cover, just as more blasts tore up the ground behind them. That was close. Jack drew even with Wheeler on the path that cut through the hillside. "What now?" "We need to regroup with the others. Our backup plan was to meet on the East Ridge. Inconveniently, it is the same one those villains above now occupy." Jack smiled. "Straight at them?" Wheeler nodded. "Directly at them, yes. But we must make haste." Jack nodded, and, without another word, sped up the hillside toward the ridge of mounted guns. Ignoring the switchback paths, he dashed over the crags and grass and was halfway up the hillside when the first rebel reached the top of the trail. The Vandal unshouldered his rifle and aimed. Jack hit the ground as the shot zipped over his head. Immediately, he was up in a sprinting attack.